Well, they've been doing that for years now, since then. And we know, for instance, we've watched the appointees of Obama's specialists on his panels, unelected people who are now experts, these science czars, etc., who are all really into sociology and family planning and depopulation. Well, every country is doing the same. Britain has its version of them too. So does Canada with their appointees now. There's many appointees almost at the top as elected people. And these are representatives of unions and everything else. And if you notice even that some of the organizations in the Occupy Wall Street you find is backed by the AFSCME, the FL-CIO, the Labour Union, and people and these organizations. And the President, Gerald McIntyre, is a co-founder and chairman of the Board for Economic Policy Institute. He's one of the leaders now at Wall Street there. And he also helped pass the Obamacare. So they're already on board, these panels, in the U.S. government, and also members of these unions down below. They're both, you see. And there's quite a few of them like that. There's also Robert Johnson, who serves as the managing director of Soros Fund Management. He also worked as the chief economist for the Senate Banking and Budget Committee. He's down there too, leading the thing against Wall Street, the charge against Wall Street. So they already have these guys on board with government and all these organizations, and they're also part of these supposedly left-wing socialist organizations for world governments, or governance they call it. Lawrence Mitchell as well. He was the Economic Policy Institute's president, a long-time member of Democratic Socialists of America, and he's also in it too. So all these big boys are in on the Wall Street thing, while they also work with these big foundations that work with the Obama and government as well. So it's government leading what appears to be a revolt of the people.
We've seen a big hype for war with Iran, with this phony assassination plot taking place last week, really paper thin, despite what the headlines would lead you to believe. Now there's other incidents. There was a guy on a plane that landed in Texas who was screaming in Arabic, and then how everyone was going to die. Now you've got these Muslims busted at a Texas courthouse who I believe they had blueprints, and there was a bomb scare or something. Are they preparing for something, Alan?
Oh, yeah. I mean, from the 90s, they've been preparing for it, in fact, because we know that the New American Century group published a list of countries they had to take out, and they wanted to start with Afghanistan, Iraq, and then it would be a toss-up between Syria or Iran to follow. They mentioned Egypt as well, and then eventually North Korea. But the main ones were in the Middle East. So and we see that Rumsfeld and Cheney have both congratulated Obama for continuing their policy of taking over those countries. Now, the New American Century group under Bush called it revolutionary democracy. In other words, you invade and force democracy upon them. And now we're seeing this group here using the color revolutions followed by hard power military power, which is exactly, again, what the think tank for the military said they'd do. And they published their findings. I've got them all up on my website, so all their different think tank reports. So they're following the agenda they said that they'd follow back in the 90s. And Jefferson said it, when you say the same policies follow from changes in house between one to the next house, then you know you're under tyranny. You're not under a different government, a different party. It's the same organization running the same policies. And that's what you're seeing.
Yeah, certainly, if you want to call it a black ops network or whatever. And now you even have reports like Paul Watson's from today on the State Department agitator who was part of the Egypt Arab Spring, backed by the State Department. Now he's advising the Occupy Wall Street movement, Alan.
Yeah, it's like the ones I just read off, too. These guys are all members and working with the government, and they also run some of the largest socialist organizations of America. I don't know if Americans realize that the Socialist International, how big and powerful they are, and that the British Labour government kicks off its annual meeting, and they finish their annual meeting, and they sing the red flag. Did they know that? Tony Blair, I've got videos of Tony Blair and all the big boys who were in charge of Britain, and they were singing, "We'll keep the red flag flying high." They don't understand that Sarkozy, all the people across the world, or right through into the United Nations, are members of this organization, including the ones in America.
Yeah, not to mention all
they sing at their annual meetings. And the press generally doesn't bother reporting that part, but in Britain, some people have. And they've filmed it and documented it.
Yeah, as a side note, I've seen a lot of these trendy bars popping up here in town in Austin with the communist hammer and sickle on the logo. But just goes to show.
Mm-hmm. So the dialectics, remember, Hegel pointed out the dialectic and how you always use opposing sides to bring out the new. And what you also do under the Marxist program, basically, is that each generation of Marxists must be more radical than the previous one. And in fact, they've got the right to eliminate physically, if need be, the older ones who are still contaminated with the old ideas. And today we're seeing the younger ones who have the fresh group, the fresh crop, they're freshly trained in university, because that's where all the leaders come from. They're all trained by professional professors to agitate for the new system, a better, a more fairer world of justice, etc. But of course, with world managers like themselves living high on the hog, because as I said, you have to have an intelligentsia class and a leisure class to help plan the future. So, this is really the Marxist agenda, and that's why the Marxism was founded basically in London. Marx was funded by one of the biggest factory owners in the whole of Europe. He wasn't a poor little guy, he had his own personal servant and all the rest of it. And they've used this dialectic for since then, because the bankers prefer socialist governments, because, as I say, there's a layer of government for every facet of humanity. It's total control over humanity is what it is.
Yeah, and maybe on the other side of the break here in the last segment, we could talk about how Al Gore, who is part of the Arm and Hammer empire, who backed the Soviet Union, called for this American version of the Arab Spring about 3 weeks before it popped up, Alan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Or your comments now as we go out to break here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Arm and Hammer, again, his father changed his name to be the Arm and Hammer that you see on the British Communist site and the British Freemason site, by the way. They use the Arm and Hammer instead of Compton Square. And that's why he changed his name to actually be a Soviet, the epitome of the Sovietism, basically. Multi-millionaire. And he had an apartment next to Lenin and then Stalin. And he could come back and forth during the Cold War, Arm and Hammer. No one stopped him, bothered him, or asked him what he was up to, and helped organize the far left in America. The big boys all knew what they were doing. The big bankers all knew what it was up about, because it's part of the agenda. They must merge the two systems together to bring out the synthesis, the next part. Final
segment with Alan Watt coming up on the other side of this break. Then tonight, the InfoWars Nightly News. Stay tuned, Infowars.com. Final segment with our guest, Alan Watt. He's covered really the spectrum here of the long-term strategy. The rebroadcast is coming up with Alex Jones, Paul Joseph Watson, Webster Tarpley, and Alan Watt, of course. But Alan, in these final few minutes, in addition to anything you want to bring up, I would just like to point out that obviously the elections are totally controlled, really have always been a farce. But at the same time, the Democratic Party is looking to co-opt the energy of Occupy movements everywhere. They have plans for new taxes. The puppets on the right also have their plans for fresh taxes. How will this energy be used, and what do we make of people like Al Gore calling for an American Arab Spring, Alan?
Well, you're going to see more and more private people from these labor organizations, or the ones who run them or control them or agitate them. More and more of those guys brought on board for government policy, just appointees, again, on behalf of the workers, as I'll tell you. And but in reality, they're professionally trained and run by the big boys who run the policy institutes, etc. So it's time for a change, to say, and really make the people think they have more representation, etc. And there'll be a lot of show in government as they yell at each other once in a while, but it'll be nothing but show. You're going into a planned society. You're already into a global society, and so many treaties have been signed over the last 50 years to bind it all together so that you can't just pull out and continue. We are now dependent on outside sources to even eat nowadays. And most of the food's being imported from elsewhere. The made sure that all the farms were destroyed. That was part of the destruction of the farms by government policies and interference with the EPA and various other agencies, all to get rid of being independent. Independence must be destroyed for a global society. And all the right-wingers as well have been parroting interdependence from the days of Maggie Thatcher onwards. So, believe you me, they're all in on the same deal at the top. There's not a bit of difference between them. You can't work your way up into politics and be vetted and okayed and be completely ignorant of the big agenda, the big goal at the end of it all. It cannot happen. And I gave up on this left-wing, right-wing strategy a long time ago. I knew it was a con. I've seen it happen in other countries too, various countries across Europe. I saw all the cons being played. It's been played in America to the very, very end, of course, because most Americans know darn well that they've just signed another free trade deal, one of the biggest ones, with various Latin American countries. That's a one-way street for trade. It's all imports into America and subsidizing those countries to come up to first world status. So we're going to pay out, pay out, pay out. That's part of the redistribution of wealth that we're talking about. So it's a one-way deal. America has to come down into austerity one way or another, and they've set up the whole game board for that to happen. When you can't feed yourself, to be honest with you, you're in trouble. That's a very basic thing. Very basic thing. And when we're totally dependent now on electricity, power, energy of all kinds, and they want to have a world grid system. They're building it now, where literally you'll have a world power supply company that will feed it to each region, and they'll decide on how much you'll get that day or that week. And that's the planned system of the future. Be very expensive even for a day's worth of it, in fact. So the companies aren't losing money by giving you less. And we're being set up with smart meters, smart grids, all for that system. But they actually have maps up of the world grid system at the United Nations and elsewhere. So we're well along the road to it, and we're still talking in a almost a 19th century paradigm about politics and left and right. We're way past that point.
Okay, Alan, we'll leave it there. We really appreciate you joining us once again and always appreciate your insights. Again, tune into the rebroadcast, and tonight, the InfoWars Nightly News. Alex Jones back tomorrow. Infowars.com, prisonplanet.com.
You don't need me to tell you that humanity is in a deep crisis. Everyone can feel it. We know a tectonic struggle is now taking place between the forces of freedom and those who love darkness, bondage, and enslavement. Yes, my friends, evil is rising. But take heart. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Recently, New World Order operative Hillary Clinton admitted they're losing the info war.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war.
The globalists are scared. They've overreached. The future of the info war is in your hands. Join prisonplanet.tv. Download the thousands of special video reports, ebooks, and more, and get them out to everyone you know. Continue to spread the word about the broadcast on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and every other globalist propaganda platform. We are going to use their system against them. The info war now goes into high gear.